Right, the time being 9:30, the committee will resume with officers of NBN Co. Mr. Rue, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Do you have any opening remarks, or shall we proceed straight to questions?
I have a very brief opening remark. I assure you won't take too long.
Very brief.
Yes, it will be brief. So I'm joined by Catherine Dyer. Catherine can answer any questions on the network build. Paul Tyler, who's our Chief Customer Officer. Business, any questions on business, Paul can help you with. Brad Whitcomb, who's down there, who's can answer any questions on residential, and Gavin Williams, who is in charge of our regional and rural area, so he will answer any questions on regional and rural issues. I'd like to give you, Chair, a very quick update of where the build is up to and how we're progressing towards the end of the volume rollout. This time last year, I told the committee we had made 8.3 million premises ready to connect. Since then, we've added 10,000 homes and businesses every working day to bring the total to 10.8 million. And the logistics of coordinating construction at that scale right across the country are frankly staggering. And I do encourage you to ask Catherine here on my left more about that tonight. And that's just the construction. When you throw in 8,000 connections every working day over this period, you get a picture of the complexity of managing thousands of interactions with Australians every day. Now, we don't get it right every time, of course. Appointments can be missed. Sometimes the connections aren't right first time and need to be fixed. And while these are only a small percentage of the overall volume, this translates into a significant number of people who have not had the expectations we strive to provide. NBN is on schedule to make 11.5 million premises ready to connect by 30 June 2020. That means that the infrastructure production machine we have built will have done its job. I want to be clear, though, there will still be premises left to connect after June, and I don't just mean new developments, which of course will need to be connected on an ongoing basis. As we said in our last corporate plan, there are likely to be around 100,000 premises defined as complex installations, which includes properties that are difficult to access and some culturally significant areas and heritage sites where design approval, construction and connection depends on factors outside our control, such as the permission from traditional owners. And I'd like to briefly give you one example of an area that won't be ready in June. In the heart of Parramatta, covering an area of around 4,500 premises, we need to step through the required controls and approvals and adopt the correct, culturally sensitive approach to the design and construction of NBN infrastructure. We will need to receive the necessary approvals under the Aboriginal Heritage Impact Plan process before we can start construction, which means we simply can't complete the build before June. These are complex and sensitive sites and really can't be rushed. Other areas of complexity are international and domestic airports, which obviously have their own set of approvals and constraints. We're working hard to resolve all these complexities and to have all sites completed as soon as possible. Aside from these sites, however, we're in a good position to have completed the volume rollout by June. Over the next few months, I will be strongly making the case that NBN employees, past and present, should be proud of what they have achieved and that their hard work is allowing people all across Australia to participate in the digital economy. I fully expect the commentary around NBN to ramp up roughly in proportion to our construction ramp down. I saw a good fact check in Comms Day recently regarding comparisons between NBN and New Zealand. To put a little more context around that particular case, if the premises covered just by our FTTP network were a country, it would be bigger than the total number of households in New Zealand, which is around 1.8 million. And incidentally, 1.8 million is about what we make ready to connect in 10 months. So you could say we do in New Zealand every 10 months, and we have maintained roughly that pace for a number of years. I simply make the point that what we are doing in Australia is unique. Size does matter when you have to haul fibre down streets and physically connect geographically dispersed towns and villages. We are 29 times the size of New Zealand, 78 times the size of South Korea, and Melbourne alone is 14 times the size of Singapore. So over the next few months, I will be taking every opportunity to move the conversation towards what Australia can do as a fully connected continent. The opportunities in health and education and for small businesses in sectors such as agriculture and tourism are enormous, and I look forward to talking more about this and of course, Chair, answering any questions you or your colleagues may have.
Thank you very much. Senator Green.
Roo, can you confirm that on in February 2018, Nbn Co entered into a 10-year contract with Speedcast to deliver enterprise-grade satellite services?
That date sounds about correct, Senator. I can't confirm it was February, but it was around that time.
Just for my knowledge, what is an enterprise-grade satellite service?
Paul, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, sure. So, actually, or Gavin, maybe you can comment, but we operate two types of satellite service. The Sky Muster service that you would know, it was a residential focused service, and then more recently we've launched what we call our business grade satellite services. So they are, as it sounds, services that are designed for the different types of needs of businesses, and Speedcast is one of the partners that we've used to deliver that service.
Okay, and does that cover the 10%, the enterprise-grade satellite services? What sort of customers are using those services?
Sort of customers that you'd have would be those offering crew welfare services in mining camps. They could be agricultural businesses. It could be a whole range of services. It's only a recent offering we brought to market, so it's quite early in the marketing of those services, but we've seen quite good appetite, and it's very early days for the take-up though.
Okay. Is it true the trading of Speedcast shares is currently suspended on the ASX?
My understanding is yes, that is correct. But again, Gavin, you'd be a bit closer to that than I would be.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well.
The information I have is it occurred on the 3rd of February, so it's been in place for about a month now, that trading halt.
Sounds right.
Okay. Why was the trading halt put in place on the company? Do you have any information about that?
I think, Senator, us commenting around a public company is probably not appropriate, but excuse me, the answer to your question will have been naturally given by Speedcast to the Australian Stock Exchange.
Okay, and do you have any information about whether the trading halt relates to serious financial or management problems?
Once again, whatever the Speedcast would have said to the stock exchange, I'd refer you to.
Okay, I understand there's been some concern about problems in the delivery of the Nbn Enterprise Satellite Service. Is there any truth to that? There's been some hiccups along the way.
Gavin, would you like to talk about the post?
Well, I think there's, in the introduction of any new service, there's teething issues that need to be addressed, such as process improvements. We've done some customer experience surveys of some of the early customers, and we're getting extraordinarily good feedback. One such example, the Bureau of Meteorology is using the service to enhance their ability to perform their particular function, and I mean, I can't really put words in their mouth, but paraphrasing, it's provided a game-changing kind of opportunity for them to have connectivity in some of the most remote sites that they operate.
Okay, it's a pretty crucial service for those remote areas. Now there's been a trading halt, though, on the company that's been contracted to provide those services. The value of the contract is about $184 million, I think was correct. Are taxpayers exposed in any way, given that there's been a trading halt on the company that we've got a contract with? Nbn Co's got a contract with?
I wouldn't see so. I mean, the business case for the business satellite service is it's a value accretive business case. So it's a profit-making venture for Nbn.
I think, Senator, I can say we're not concerned about the Commonwealth being exposed in any way. In this case, it's a service that we have launched, and it's been several months in the launching, and certainly been through plenty of test phases, and we're very confident about its future. And certainly the feedback that Mr. Tyler is getting from the market is very strong. It's a service that people are looking for, whether they be mining companies or whatever they're looking for in regional Australia. So I think I can give you some comfort that we're satisfied that our service won't be impacted.
And we've taken the or are taking the prudent steps that you would imagine to ensure that we can continue to operate the service, regardless of outcomes.
Everyone's very calm about a trading halt being put on a company that we've got a huge contract with. What steps are you taking? What have you put in place to ensure that you can continue delivering the service?
Well, let's remember we built the service, so it's up, it's running. The real heavy lifting is in establishing the service in the first place. So that's done, and it's working, and it's receiving, as Mr. Williams said, very good feedback from the market in terms of the performance that it's delivering and the capability it's providing. So what we're actually talking about is how Speedcast are involved in the running of that service, and there are various ways that we can address that. Again, it's, I won't go into the details. It would be probably a bit imprudent.
Why is that the case? Just
in terms of commercial in confidence, we have a contract, we have a valid contract, it's on foot and it is running.
You don't want to elaborate on any steps of due diligence you might have been taking since that decision was made since the 3rd of February? What have you put in place? What processes have you put in place to ensure that that contract stays in place?
Well, so I can't comment on Speedcast's financial position. That's a matter for Speedcast. But I can tell you on the ground, we're working closely day by day with Speedcast. We continue to engage with the market, engage with the significant market opportunities we have with that product, and the service, the working with the pipeline, working with our customers, operating the service continues unabated.
Okay, it's not going to put at risk any of those the connections for people living in remote areas?
I think there's a range of reasons. It's a matter for Speedcast to understand why they've put a trading halt in place, but we've got a strong operating capability on the ground with Speedcast, delivering an ongoing quality job for our business and enterprise customers in that footprint.
Okay, my colleague has some questions for you.
I want to ask some questions regarding the ACCC's pricing inquiry. With the right people at the table. What could have been done for regional Australia or consumers if capital had not been diverted to duplicating fibre builds in areas that already had fibre?
Sorry, Sandra, I'm trying to understand. You asked about the ACCC pricing inquiry, and then you
sounded like a hypothetical, actually, Chair.
Well, sorry. Could you? I'm sorry, Sandra. I just don't follow your question.
No, that's all right.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat it? Maybe I've just missed your question.
That's all right. I think it might be something to do with it being 9:45 at night, and probably on my part rather than yours. So just give me a moment. Do you want to go to Senator Davey and then come back to me? Okay.
All right. I have some questions.
Sorry, I'll come back.
I'd like to step through previous targets for financial year 2020 to examine how NBN has tracked against historical as well as more recent targets. Some of this I do understand was covered in the Joint Standing Committee, so I appreciate you've given extensive evidence to that committee there. So for completeness, we'll just run through it pretty quickly, try to get to the bottom of it. In 2017, the NBN Corporate Plan forecasts NBN Co would generate $5 billion in annual revenue in financial year 2020. So irrespective of what happens in this financial year, NBN will miss that annual target by at least $1.1 billion. Is that correct?
As I explained at the committee, thank you for pointing out last, I don't know when it was, Thursday, was it? You've got to consider these plans in totality. So if I go back to the very first corporate plan that I was involved with, which was put out in June would have been August 2015, and I think we called it the Corporate Plan 16 at the time. We laid out a plan that basically said that we would complete the build of the network in 2020. We said that it would cost within a range of 46 to 56 billion, and we said that we were targeting 49 billion. But we also had within there a contingency of and Senator, I don't have the exact number in my head, but it's something like 4.5 billion. And the contingency is important because in any project, any large infrastructure project, you naturally put in contingencies for things that occur. And they're part of the cost base or the expected cost of the project. In our case, the cost is the cost is a net cost. It's the difference between the revenue we generate and obviously the operating and capital expenditure that would occur. So when you look at any long-range plan, you've got to actually look at where are you going to be at the end of the project. There will be intermediary steps, but it's where will you be at the end of the project. And as we sit here, as we said in last year's corporate plan, we will complete the project or the build in 2020. We will get to cash flow break even at the end of 2022. And during that period of time, the cost will be $51 billion, which is well within the range we put out back in 2015 and is also within...
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I know you're going to some detailed information that you have given to a previous committee, but I don't think we're quite getting there with my question.
Because I'm getting to your... Sorry, I am honestly getting to your question, but it's important to understand how a project cost is actually set up in place. And then on top of that is what does the business look like when you've completed the project, if you like, the ongoing business. So when you look at any individual line item over multiple years, there'll always be variations. But remember that the contingency is a really important part because that contingency was put in place to predict that there will be variances over time. So rather than looking at a line-by-line item, any individual line-by-line item, the way you must look at this is how much will the build of NBN cost over a period of time and what's the time frame in which the build will be completed. And I put to you, rather than looking at any individual line item, which will always differ, what you should look at is have we completed the build with taxpayers' money as we said we would, and have we done it in the time frame? And I'm really proud of the team that we will have built it when we said we would, and we will have spent well within the range of what we said we would. And it is extraordinary for a project of this incredible complexity across a whole nation, a continent, not just a nation, to complete a project when we said we would in the amount of money we said we would is extraordinary. So any individual line item, Senator, will always move. The contingency is moved. All the numbers will move. But the fact is not the individual numbers. Okay. It is how much does this cost the taxpayer?
I see what you're saying.
And in what time frame?
I accept that you're saying that things change over time. What I am putting to you and what I have to look at is the information that was given in terms of targets that were set and whether those targets have been changed over time or whether we've got there.
And Senator, those targets have been met. We said we'd finish the build in 2020 and we said it would cost this amount of money, and that's exactly what we've done.
I'm talking about targets in terms of annual revenue. And the 2020 target in 2017 was $5 billion. So we're not going to get there. In 2018, the corporate plan had a $4.9 billion revenue forecast. So NBN's going to miss that target, but that was what was set in 2018. Again, as you say, things change over time. But in the 2019 corporate plan, the last plan that we had before we were going into the election, as you know, had a big change in what that target for 2020 would be. It changed from $4.9 to $3.9 billion in terms of revenue. And NBN will, at this stage, probably just meet or may miss that target. And the corporate plan now that we have for 2020 has again revised down the 2020 revenue forecast to $3.7 billion. So we've gone from 5 to 4.9, 3.9, 3.7, and we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars here, we're talking about billions of dollars. And in terms of contingencies, that's quite a big change. That's based on your half-yearly results. Is there actually any possibility that you would miss the 2020 target that's now been set? How are you tracking for the target for 2020 that has been set in 2020, which has been revised down to 3.7?
So Sandra, I'll answer your question in a second, but I really urge you not to think about targets being missed, because we haven't. We have had a project that has been completed on time within the money we said we would, and that is extraordinary achievement by the team on behalf of the nation to ensure that everybody can get to a minimum level of service ubiquitous across the nation. We have not missed the targets that you're talking about. In terms of this particular year, we are pleased with our progress this year. As you can see that what Catherine has been doing in terms of building the network, we've been building the network faster than even we imagined, so we've been thrilled with the progress of the build. As I said in my statement, up to 10.8 million premises already built out of the 11.5 corporate plan target, so we're well on track to complete the build when we said we would. And in terms of connections, we've been very pleased with the work that Mr Wickham and Mr Tyler have been doing with our retail partners. And again, we're slightly ahead of the targets. You're right, that we set ourselves. And again, we're thrilled with that, and that's a good thing. So our revenue is tracking. Our revenue is tracking slightly ahead of our budget. That is correct.
Okay, but that is a target that has been changed substantially since.
Senator, the individual year. The individual years or the individual lines you mustn't look at. You must look at have we completed the network when we said we would, and has it cost what we said we would? And it's an extraordinary effort to do that. And that's what you got to look at. The contingency is put in place for the variations that you're calling out. So it's no surprise there's variations. There always will be in any project.
Just before we go any further, I haven't asked you any questions, I don't think, in a committee before about the NBN, and I know you're trying to win me over. I know you're very proud of the work that you've done. I can't open a PDF in my own electorate office, so I'm not someone that you're going to get won over with the brilliance of NBN at this stage.
I'm not trying to win you over.
Let me go through the process of asking some questions about the targets that have been set and whether those have been met. We can talk about all of the other things later on down the track, but I want to go through this information because I think it is important. I would like to know the 2018 corporate plan forecast $3.5 million in the revenue for the financial year at 19. So we're talking about another set of targets. This is for financial year ending 19. How much revenue did the NBN actually earn in the financial year ending 19?
If you bear with me, I'll answer that. Yeah, 19?
Yeah.
Sorry, 2.8 billion. So
that, again, was lower than the forecast 3.5 billion that was set in 2018.
Senator, I'm only going to repeat what I said again. You must look over the long term of a project, and you must look over the cost of the project to the Commonwealth and what's being delivered, and that hasn't been missed. And that's what continues. So, maybe I can help you. Do you want me to help you with contingencies?
No, you don't need to be helping me with contingencies. On those figures that you have mentioned previously, though, you're talking about hitting the budget of $51 billion.
That's as laid out in last year's corporate plan, yes.
Okay. Didn't the government promise to deliver NBN for $29.5 billion?
I can't answer that. I actually can't answer that. All I can answer is what this team laid out in the corporate plan back in June 2015, and that was clearly a range of 46 to 56 billion, Senator. I can't comment on other...
A range of?
46 to 56 billion dollars. That's in, you'll find that in the corporate plan that we released in August 2015. It was a plan that Mr. Whitcomb and I actually were instrumental with, obviously in leading. Obviously the teams did the work, but in leading.
Okay, I can see where that figure has come from. So in 2013, and you're right, this isn't a question for you, it's probably a question for the government, a target for the build was $29.5 billion. That was in 2013 under the Turnbull-Abbott government. Abbott and then Turnbull, or maybe Turnbull and Abbott changed a few times. Then it was revised to $41 billion in 2013, up to $49 billion with that additional $8 billion with the range in 2015. So that, I mean, that's a target you're referring to that was set back in 2015. I am also trying to go through with you some targets that were set back in previous years that instead of being met are instead being revised as we go along. So we're meeting those targets. Isn't that what's happening?
I can't comment on anything prior to the 1st of July 2014 when I started with the company. But what I can comment on is that that the management team were asked to put together a plan of completing a network and how that will be done and operationally and what time frame that will be put in place. So the only thing, Senator, I can talk to is the plan that this team put together back in 2014 and 15 that was released that I'm talking to, which is the 46 to 56 plan that would be completed in 2020 with a cash flow positivity a few years after that. And yes, you're right. We had within that was a target to get to 49 billion, but we were always clear that there was a range as well.
Okay. So, I mean, I've got a series of figures in front of me. I think there's an ongoing pattern when it comes to revenue and the targets that were set. I could go through them each one by one, but I think that might be a bit tedious, and I don't think you and I are going to agree on whether those are relevant figures, but I think that they are. But there is an interesting pattern here emerging. Over the past few years, NBN have missed key historical targets that they've set, but then...
Senator Green, I think Mr Roux has been incredibly patient with your assertions. He has very clearly articulated where your assertions are not true, and just by repeating them over and over does not make them any truer, because I think Mr Roux has been very clear on the achievement and that they have met their targets. So by asserting it over again doesn't actually make it true, because it's not.
Minister, what's actually happening is that I'm referring to targets that were in corporate plans. They're public documents. And Mr Roux, with all due respect, is asking me to take other things into consideration other than the fact that the targets were changed. Now, we can have different opinions about why things have changed, why targets weren't met, but I'm just putting simply that historical targets weren't met, have been changed. That is a concern.
I think if I was going to put this simply, I think you're looking at individual trees, not the whole forest. And what Mr Roux is saying is that they've actually delivered exactly what was required, and he's explained how they've managed that and in terms of the variations along the way. So again, how you're characterising Mr Roux's evidence tonight is simply misrepresentation.
I'm not making any characterisation of Mr Roux's evidence. I'm actually trying to interpret figures on a piece of paper. What's happening is I'm getting a characterisation of those figures and a real desire for me to take into account some other issues and other things that are irrelevant to the questions with me. I'm going to go through the questions that I've prepared. I'm going to make sure that we get some answers to these on the record, and then we can move on to some other topics. Okay. So, as I was saying before I was interrupted, the historical targets that were set, particularly in the corporate plans that I've referred to, have been revised on a year-to-year basis down to a point where the target could be met or missed only by a small amount. Isn't that a concern going forward about the historical targets that you're setting in 2020? Will they be met in future years, or will they be revised down?
I think, Senator, to give you some comfort, I think when you've got a management team with an organisation that has actually delivered an unbelievably complex and difficult infrastructure build and connecting to a whole nation over multiple years, and has actually cost the taxpayer what we said it would and have completed when we said we would, I think you can get some confidence from that the team is able to operate the business well and to set ourselves up to be very successful in the future. And I think you should gain a lot of comfort from the fact that this team continues to deliver for the country.
Another set of data that I'd like to talk to you about is trends in terms of activations. It's another target that is set in the 2016 corporate plan, for example. Nbn forecast that it would have 7.2 million active customers by the financial year ending 2019. Based on the half-yearly results and the weekly report, Nbn won't exceed that even for the 2020 period, which is 1 year later. Is that's correct in terms of activations?
So I'm sorry, I'm going to almost repeat my previous answers, but again, when you lay out a long-term plan, a contingency is in place for things that move within those long terms. Within year by year. What's actually important is where you end up. And again, where we are, the really exciting thing for me, genuinely exciting thing for me, is that when you look at the corporate plan, we said that we would have around about 73% of homes would connect to NBN post-disconnection. And we're seeing that trend of 73% of homes approximately connecting to NBN at the end of disconnection. So again, Senator, I put to you that what's actually important is not year by year variations, because that's what contingencies are for. What matters is where are you going to end up in terms of the number of homes connected to NBN. And with a footprint of 11.5 or so million homes, we are seeing exactly that. We're seeing 73% of homes in the fixed line network. Sorry, I should be clear. In the fixed line part of the network, we're seeing 73% of homes connect to NBN.
Mr. Rowe, in 2016...
So once again, Senator, we're hitting the targets we said we would back years ago. It's where you, in a project, it's where you end up that matters. And the contingencies are in place for year-by-year variations.
That's not the only thing that matters. If you set targets...
But, Senator, that's
historical targets, and then you don't meet them.
The contingencies are there for variations. What matters is...
Sorry, Green,
if I maybe make this, because you seem to want to put things to me rather than answer what I'm asking. 2016 corporate plan, the target for activations in the financial year ending 19 was 7.2 million. Is that correct?
I'll take your word for it. I don't have it in front of me. I'm happy to take your word for it.
Okay. And now in the 2020 plan, the target for activations is 5.5 million. Does anyone have...
So again, I'm happy to take your word for that, Senator, but I'm only going to repeat what I just said. It gets to, in a project with a contingency in place, deliberately for variations that you get in timings on lots of things, up and down, by the way, that what matters is, when you're building an infrastructure across a nation, is how many people are actually connecting to that infrastructure.
Okay, I'm just going to go through
exactly
this so
what
we
said
can
it would.
move on.
Sorry, Senator Green, just on terms of that, you're talking about the 2016 corporate plan.
Yes.
I think something very important in this context is two things. The first of all, what Mr Roux has been talking about, that 2016 corporate plan forecast a range of 46 to 56 billion, which Mr Roux has multiple times now said that has been achieved. But a very interesting point that you might be to know about that 2016 corporate plan is it also projected an NBN funding under an all-fibre labour model to be $30 billion more and 6 to 8 years longer than what NBN has now delivered. So I think Mr Roux has been very clear that they have met those 2016 targets in terms of that range of forecast, and they've done so in a way that is 6 to 8 years less than your Labor plan, and certainly $30 billion less. So, bravo NBN.
What a sad response to bring up Labor when I'm asking about
You asked about the
activations.
2016 corporate plan.
I didn't mention anything about
Minister, Senator Green, do not.
what a
2016 corporate plan, Senator Green.
desperate attempt to make these targets go away.
Senator Green.
2016.
So, Senator Green, there is no. I think Mr Roux has been at pains to not hide away from the
He
record
was
of
doing a
achievement,
better job
but he's
before you tried to intervene.
articulated it very clearly.
Order, Minister, thank you.
2017. Let's just go through quickly. 2016 corporate plan activations in 2020, 8.33 million.
Where do you see that, Senator? The 2016 plan, I think, went to 2018.
Okay. The 2017 corporate plan had a goal or a target of 8.1 million active customers. And I think there was even a motto at the time that referred to 8 million happy customers. That was the goal that was set as the target. 2018 corporate plan revised down, that was 8.1 million, so we stuck with that target for another year. In 2019, the corporate plan revised that target for 2020 down to 7.5 million customers. Don't know if I had the word happy in that one. 2020, the corporate plan had the forecast all the way down to 7.0 million customers. So over over 5 years, the corporate plan, every time it came out, changed that prediction and revised it down over 1.3 million active customers. And the reason I'm addressing this with you is if it was you've urged me not to look at things in isolation, and if there was the proposed or target revenue that we discussed at the beginning, if that was just a one-off, then I think we could accept that there were contingencies in place and reasons why that might happen. But it's also the activations that are being revised down year by year.
Is there a question
Is it
here,
not?
Senator Green, at some point? I think that was a very long question, and what was the question? There was a very long statement, but what was the question for either myself or for Mr Roux?
I think I'm speaking to Mr Roux. I haven't addressed a question to you, Minister.
Thank you.
I'm asking Mr Roux why the targets keep being revised down, not just for one target or one type of target, but seemingly for multiple types of targets.
Because that's the very purpose of the contingency that you put in place, to deal with things that come out, like that when you lay out a plan in 2000 and what started in 14, published in 15, when you lay out a plan that there will be variations. But the target that we set ourselves was a particular amount of money to spend and a time frame to complete. And by the way, the number of premises that we would have connecting to the network. And Senator, we have achieved that, and that I don't want to repeat myself, but that is an extraordinary achievement from a team to achieve a network build across a nation using 6 different technologies. I won't bore you with what we've actually built, but Senator, that's just extraordinary, and we have achieved it within the funding that we said we would and the time frame we said we would, with the customers on the network that we said we would, and that's extraordinary.
But
And there will always be, Sandra,
Are you able to comment
you look at any...
No, I'm just asking, I'm going to move on, but do you have a direct comment about these targets that have changed year after year in the corporate plan?
My comment is that numbers will always change over a period of time, but what's important in a project is, have you completed when you said you would in the time frame, in the funding envelope you said you would, and we have centred on that. That is a fantastic performance by the team.
Okay.
And Senator Green, just one of the points, just to pick up what Mr Rue has said, if you have a look at the rate and the pace now of take-up, it is quite extraordinary. So currently more than 10.8 million premises are ready to connect. 94% of Australian premises can order an NBN service. More than 6.6 million premises are already connected to the NBN. Around 30,000 premises are taking it up every single week now, which is an extraordinary exponential growth. And that goes to the extraordinary work that NBN has done that Mr Rue has talked about. But this compares to 51,000 in total premises connected by Labor. And we're connecting more now. The NBN is now connecting more every 2 weeks than you actually managed to do in 6 years. So it is an extraordinary...
So ridiculous and unnecessary, Minister. I'm not asking any questions about comparing Labor's plans. I'm not setting up a Dixer in question time for you to read a prepared statement from about why the Labor plan didn't get there, and after 7 years you have managed to do what you should have done and connected NBN. We're going to move on to some other questions. My colleagues got some questions about ACCC pricing.
Minister, this is about asking questions of fact of NBN as opposed to swapping political barbs. Senator Green, you have the call to ask questions.
I'm going to seek the call.
Senator
Try
Smith.
again. Thank you. Just back to my questions, we'll give it another crack. Thank you, Mr Rue. What insights are you able to share with this committee about households who take up 12 megabit per second NBN plans? Specifically, I'm interested in what are their characteristics and is there a particular skew in the demographic?
Yeah, no, thank you, Senator. Brad, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, certainly. So first to say that as a wholesaler, we don't have a direct relationship with the customers that would take up the plan. So we think about it more in terms of personas or overall demographic rather than who is the individual that's in that home or that business. Having said that, it's a surprisingly broad range. So it's not necessarily skewed along income, although certainly the lower income people would be more prevalent in that 12-1 category. But there are certainly many other people that are down there as well. And a lot of that has to do with when people came onto the network, oddly enough. So people that have come on, say, 3 or 4 years ago might have come on a 12-1 plan and have not yet been upgraded. So we see a lot of that where people probably aren't on the, what we would consider to be the appropriate plan, but they are sitting on a 12-1.
Sure. And in your experience, is the take-up of 12 megabit per second predominantly driven by the commercial incentives of retail providers, or is it demand-driven, i.e. households actively searching for the most affordable entry-level plans, or is it more of a push factor from commercial providers?
I think it's a combination. It's a combination of different retailers taking different commercial models into the market. And then, there's certainly a job to be done in terms of education around, what speed actually delivers. I think there's a surprising number of people that wouldn't necessarily know what they could do with the 12.1 versus the 50 megabit per second plan as an example. So we do try to educate the general public around, size of household, number of devices, et cetera, and the likely speed tier that would serve your needs.
If I could just add to that, one of our concerns, Senator, is actually we see a lot of small business who's on a residential 12.1 service, and they don't realise that. And in fact, when you look at the needs of small business, we did some research recently that showed that the more that small business spends on internet spending, the higher is both their revenue and employment growth. And so we would like to see small businesses understand better perhaps their options, and certainly in many cases buy a higher speed package than they have been sold.
All right, thank you. Is there any correlation between households who do not use much internet ending up on these 12 megabit per second plans?
Not as much as you would think. So we do see heavy users on 12.1, and we would also see potentially lighter users on the higher speed plans as well. And that could be a source of frustration for customers, particularly in that 12.1 category, where they may make full use of the broadband connection that they've got. And as we see, as data consumption rises, particularly for the cohort of customers that are on that lower speed plan, that dissatisfaction also tends to rise.
So how efficient do you think the market and retailers are at matching the right households with these plans?
It's a very complex topic, I think. It's something that it's not like water where you turn the faucet and you can see how much water is actually coming out. So I think there's definitely an education job to be done across the industry. I feel we can play a role in that, certainly the retailers as well.
According to the most recent ACCC data, the number of households taking up 12 megabit per second increased over the last quarter, but it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that this may not reflect that material of a change. Can you confirm that prior to recent pricing development, NBN Co was requiring retail providers to pay the same wholesale price for 12, 25 and 50 megabyte per second speed bundles, which in turn meant that some retailers were buying a higher wholesale speed but then repackaging and shaping it to 12 megabits per second for their retail customer?
There were instances where the economics of the higher speed plans were attractive to the retailers, and in some cases then they would shape that end customer back down to the lower speed. I believe with two things in mind. One, they didn't want to lose the opportunity to upsell that customer to a higher speed tier in the future, so they didn't want to just open up the pipe, if you will. And also a concern that if customers had access to higher speeds, they would consume more data. If they consume more data, then we have a CVC charge associated with that. So it was a cost-saving measure.
So have those retailers now moved those customers from a higher wholesale tier onto a lower household tier while keeping the retail plan unchanged? Is that what's happened?
In some cases, yes.
Yeah. And what determines the incentive of retailers to sell the entry-level plans, and how have those incentives changed over time with the NBN pricing strategy?
So we take a comprehensive approach and certainly consult very heavily with industry around the mix of products that we're offering and the prices associated with them, and importantly, what the level of the CVC inclusion comes with each of the speed tiers within the bundle. We attempt to model then how retailers will best use those plans into the market, but ultimately it's up to the retailer to decide how they want to optimize that trade-off of customer experience, their own economics, how they want to price that back into the market. So I'd say that's a very efficient market in terms of how the retailers make best use of the plans that we make available.
The ACCC has commenced an inquiry into NBN pricing with a particular focus on affordability. One of the stated concerns is users being forced to pay more when they switch from ADSL to the NBN. From a pure commercial standpoint, what are the risks of having an entry-level productive that is too cheap?
Well, it would tend to drive more customers down into that much lower speed tier. And we do believe that for the most part, customers get a better experience when they have access to the speeds that meet their needs in the home. And so when you start talking about entertainment or multiple devices, kids doing their homework, etc., typically that requires a higher speed tier than a 12.1. So we've made a very concerted effort, and in fact, if you know, to kind of summarize our approach to pricing is much more for a little bit more in terms of the pricing that we charge, and that's to uplift the digital capability of the nation, and we see that better served when people have access to a lot of capacity and higher speed. To the extent that the entry-level price gets pulled down and the economics become more attractive for retailers, more people would tend to find themselves there. as I mentioned earlier, the awareness around the impact of not having the right speed is limited across the market. So you're relying on a consumer group that might not be fully aware of the implications. They could take up lower speed tiers. They won't get the experience that they want. It doesn't unleash the network that we built.
And on top of that, Senator, obviously it would lead to more, as Mr. Wickham was saying, more people on lower entry level, and therefore lower revenues for NBN, and therefore longer term lower cash flows. And you know, I've been on the public record many times as saying that it's important to balance the needs of retailers, the needs of NBN, and obviously the needs of consumers. But the needs of NBN is to have a strong cash flow going forward, so that we on behalf of customers can continue to invest in the network. And it is absolutely in the long-term interest of customers for us to have cash flows that we can continue to invest in the network to improve customer experience and to continue to evolve our network. And so obviously lower revenues doesn't fulfil the needs that will exist, which is to continue to invest in the network, as well as Mr. Wickham said, lower customer experience and quite frankly spending you know, money on a network and having lots of people on low speeds, I don't think is a good outcome.
So Mr. Roux, is it your view as CEO that entry-level 12 megabit per second plans should provide unlimited data at a $60 price point, or do you consider the whole sale pricing structure should support a $60 price point but without unlimited data?
I think that when I'll answer that in this way. When we set about doing the pricing consultation with the industry, which again Mr. Wickham led, and it was completed in November last year, we sought to achieve a few things. We sought to achieve better customer experience. We sought to achieve good financial outcomes for NBN and good financial outcomes for the retailers. And as part of that, we ended up with a pricing bundle on 12.1, which we felt met the market needs that retailers had, so that they themselves could make money through this, but also that met the needs of NBN for what I just described as the longer term cash flows of the business, and which met the needs of ensuring that customer experience was in some way maximised as best we could. So the pricing was set to achieve exactly what you said, which was that there are currently $60 price plans to pick that. I think they're actually $59, many $59 unlimited price plans in the marketplace, sold by many retailers today, for example.
Yeah, no worries.
Am I right that you sell packages according to speed? So when people talk about 12 megabits or 25, that's the download speed. But the retailers sell data packages, which is how much data you can download, which is maybe linked to speed, but your plans are speed, and retailers, when they're selling their $60 plans, they may be unlimited data or limited data, depending on the retailer. Is that correct? Is there a differentiation?
So to be completely precise, we sell what's called a Layer 2 speed plan, which both upload and downlink to a retailer. And we also charge them for a certain amount of capacity or bandwidth, if you like. Then retailers take all that, and they then, as you quite rightly say, bundle up a series of plans to their customers, which often has a busy hour speed, and they may choose unlimited, or in some cases is limited packages. So you're quite right.
Thank you. That's fine.
Senator Van, do you want to ask a question, or we'll go back to Senator Smith?
If I may, Chair. And firstly, Mr. Roux, and to your team, apologies you drew the short straw and ended up at the end of 2 days of estimates, and sorry that some people are tired, and that happens.
Senator Van, I've been doing this for 6 years, and I've always got this time frame. So I've got I have no idea why, but I've got used to it.
The luck of the Irish, I think, is right.
It's the luck of the
Can I a question for Mr. Dyer? Could you expand on the reasons that some of the premises won't be done by June, and what is the process to deal with those?
So we are on target to complete the rollout as set out in our corporate plan by June 2020 this year, and we've been on track now, or on target for 21 months in a row, with February just closing out, which is an excellent achievement for us. But we are seeing, as we complete the network rollout, we are seeing some complex premises that have external approvals associated with them, which there are, timeframes outside of NBN Co's control, which may fall outside of the June timeframe. Now, the intention is with those premises, and again, Mr. Roo did refer to some in Parramatta, which we know is going to be impacted. We've also had recently, with the bushfires, Mallacoota, the SAM, or the fibre area, was actually fully constructed and was waiting for the transit link, or the backhaul, which was aerial, and the majority of that burnt down in the fires. So we're now rapidly looking at rebuilding that, and more than likely underground as well. So when you think of instances like Parramatta, Mallacoota, that have external problems or issues for us to solve, again, we're working through them quite rapidly, but they're outside of our control. We're also working on very complex premises. So at the moment, for example, we're constructing to Canberra Airport. We're constructing to Melbourne Airport, Sydney Airport. We're still having negotiations with Brisbane Airport. We haven't started construction on that airport. With the Telecommunications Act, we're not able to utilise our federal powers for land access to those premises, and we very much need to work in collaboration with the airports to construct to those premises. So anything beyond June, the intention is to have a construction plan and a date. So if something is not able to connect to the NBN, there'll be a reason for that, and with a construction plan of when they'll be able to connect.
Thank you, Ms. Dime. Just sharing it around a little bit with the team. Could Mr. Whitcomb talk about some of the initiatives that you have underway to improve customer experience?
Yeah, sure. So I think we're quite pleased with the progress that we've made over the last couple of years, in particular around improving customer experience, in particular the impact that the move to the bundles, the move to the inclusion of the CVC in that bundle, and therefore decongesting the network, has had on overall experience. We've seen that massive uplift. A couple of years back, we had somewhere around 500 minutes of congestion in the busy hour per customer per week. That's down to around 20 minutes, so sort of a nominal level now, and customers are seeing that. Next cabs off the rank is a much closer working relationship with retail service providers, in particular where customers may believe they have a problem with their service. It goes into what we would consider to be the fixed loop, where there could be a handoff between NBN and the RSP. That issue may not immediately get resolved, and that clearly would cause frustration for the customer. So how we close that fixed loop is an area of big focus. Another area is looking at the whole in-home environment. And for many customers, they will experience poor Wi-Fi performance. They could have their Wi-Fi put in the wrong room, configured improperly, and then they'll believe that their entire internet experience is substandard and not what they signed up for. So there's a job to be done there in terms of education. We also do a lot of independent testing of Wi-Fi capabilities and modem capabilities, and we share that with retailers so that then they can take action. Sometimes it's just a matter of uploading new firmware and getting the device to perform better. Sometimes it's a swap out. And then stepping even further into that field is in-home wiring, which can impact some of the copper-based services. And so we've developed the ability to remotely determine with a pretty high degree of accuracy whether there's something wrong inside the homeowners with their wiring, provide that information to work with them to get out and fix that wiring. So those are a few of the things that we're working on.
Thank you. And they sound amazing. And I live in a city, Melbourne, and I'm apparently it's coming past our door in the next couple of months, so I'm looking forward to some of those initiatives to help.
That's great.
If I might put a question to Mr. Tyler, please. Could you expand on the decision to withdraw from enterprise end-user deals and what that might mean for large businesses who want to take up the NBN?
Sure. Very happy to. So let's recap what we actually announced. It certainly wasn't that we're withdrawing from participation in the enterprise market or the value proposition of choice and of reach that the NBN business offering brings to the market would go away. Certainly not the case. What we announced was that we would cease signing build contracts directly with end customers. So we offer broadband services, of course, as a wholesaler, always through a retailer. But for build services, where we're actually constructing a network, we have on occasion signed contracts directly with end users. We've for a long time signed contracts with RSPs to deliver build services. But it's certainly fair that there was an increasing level of frustration from some of the retailers that they didn't like us signing the build contracts directly with end users. So we took that feedback and we took the decision to stop doing that. But we haven't changed our revenue targets. We haven't changed our desire to participate in that market. We haven't changed our plans to educate the market, stimulate competition, things like that. We just won't be signing build contracts directly anymore. And some of our largest contracts were signed directly through the retailers, even for build services in any case. So our aspiration hasn't changed. We certainly want to continue doing the good work we're doing across all segments of the business market. But it's very important that we have a constructive and cooperative relationship with our retailers. They are our only channel to market, and this was an area of frustration, so we listened to them and we evolved our model accordingly.
Thank you so much. And bouncing back to the other end of the table, Mr. Williams, could you explain what your new team is designed to do and what are the plans for engaging in regional Australia?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. So the new team was established about 3 months ago with the express intention really for NBN to do the best job it possibly can to help regional Australia lift the digital economy. That's not to say, I'm proud as part of the NBN team on some of the stuff we've done over the years in a landmass. It's pretty tough to cover, but as the build program moves towards the end of that build phase, particularly in regional and remote Australia, it's the appropriate time for our business to understand how we can better participate with local communities, to understand local issues, to resolve issues to the extent we can, both on basic connectivity, but very importantly, move beyond basic connectivity. So what we've done organisationally is bring together what were, we could say, disparate parts of our product portfolio that serves regional and remote Australia, being the fixed wireless and satellite portfolio, under one organisational roof, if you like. And the other key part outside of that technology is to expand the number of community engagement professionals that we have located in regional Australia. And alongside them, an additional focus and a level of thought leadership to engage with key sectors that are so important for the growing economies and the growing needs of regional Australia, that include digital literacy, small business innovation and growth, areas of health and education, and very importantly in agricultural technology. So it's relatively early days for us. We've been very focused, for example, on the ongoing job of building the capacity of our fixed wireless network to what's now nominal non-congestion in the radio access network, but acknowledging there's way more work to do to improve our processes, and that's the thing. We're in local communities. As we've been sitting here, my partner from Western Victoria, she sent me a note from the Ararat newspaper with some community concerns about fixed wireless upgrades, and my team in Western Victoria will be reaching out with those communities to understand, to explain, and ensure that we can do a better job each day.
Terrific. Just one more question.
We'll go back
Thank you,
to,
Chair.
Senator Green.
Can someone from your team, Mr. Roo, take the committee through their response to the recent bushfires?
Oh, yes, certainly, Senator. Actually, it's Mr. Williams again who led really the team through that. So, Mr. Williams, you want to talk to that, please?
So Nbn has a pretty comprehensive emergency management regime that aims to manage crises at, it sounds weird, but the lowest practical level. So rather than over-indexing on it, but it needs to understand what, with the level of situational awareness, what level of focus needs to be placed. In the case of the bushfire tragedy, we put in place our executive response team. We had a preliminary meeting on the 31st of December. We decided to form the XRT, as we call it, on the 1st of January, and it was activated on the 2nd of January. That brought together all parts of Nbn and our partners, and it put in place a comprehensive communication regime that enabled us to work with emergency management organisations on the one hand through to important media outlets such as the ABC on the other, and very importantly our internal people who are across the field. If I could characterise a couple of pillars, 3 pillars within that response, the first being our work on our core network to ensure that network saw as minimal impact as possible and was recovered as quickly as possible. The second was working on our individual customer services, so proactively reaching out with our RSP partners and with in customers such as impacted small businesses. And the third, in local communities, deploying Nbn local through our muster trucks, for example, getting satellite installs into evacuation centres around the south coast of New South Wales and around these parts, Malakuta and Kangaroo Island as well. I think the response, I've been involved, I'm an old hack in the industry, been involved in a number of these kind of things. I'm pretty proud of the part of the team that responded to this particular tragedy. I'd characterise the network behaved very well, but there was a lot of forward planning that enabled that to happen, such things as pre-staging generators, so that as soon as safe access was available, we could power up our network assets. We were able to respond very quickly to service incidents, but the job's not done. Our experience with the Townsville floods, we can still see the community still in recovery mode there, so we continue to be engaged in local communities to support the rebuild activities.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. As a crisis management professional for 20 plus years before coming in here, it sounds like your planning and your efforts worked very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Smith.
Thank you, Chair. All right. We're on the home stretch now, everyone. If I can bring you back to my line of questioning earlier, my next question was, what are the risks of regulatory intervention of your entry-level pricing structure, and in what ways will that impact the pricing strategy you have, which runs through other speed tiers?
Yeah, I think Senator and Brad, feel free to jump in. I think in terms of we would see, if there was a big reduction in the 12.1 pricing, we would see more people, I think, on the 12.1 service, which I don't think is a good outcome, and certainly we will see poorer customer experience, and we'll also see those small businesses example that I was talking to earlier, Senator. Equally, there would be reductions of revenue, and so in order for, if we were to not want there to be a drift down of a lot of customers onto 12.1, we would have to look at the pricing structure of speed tiers above 12.1, which would obviously have an even greater detrimental revenue impact. It may address perhaps some of the customers not going to 12.1. In other words, we may end up with the same mix we have today, but that would have an even greater impact upon our revenues. And the reason why we need strong revenues is so that we can continue to invest in this network. A network is a living, breathing thing. You need to continue to invest in the network for things like resilience that we were talking about earlier with Senator Van, but also to ensure that services are good for customers and also to ensure that we can continue to upgrade the network. So for all those reasons, we need to be we set the pricing, we set what we thought was a fair pricing outcome with the industry following extensive, many months of consultation. And a disturbance of that would have a detrimental impact, I think, on consumers long term.
Can you just clarify, your concerns, do they apply to the peak funding period or also beyond that period as well?
Clearly, depending upon if there were changes implemented earlier than later, clearly would have an impact on peak funding. But I am much more concerned around the long-term cash flows of the organisation for the reasons I outlined, Senator.
Okay. And does NBN Co expect that competition from 5G will temper and potentially force the company to moderate its entry-level pricing over time?
Vlad, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly recognise that retail service providers will have alternatives. And so as we think about the portfolio of our pricing that we offer, we bear that in mind. We do currently see upwards of 15% of homes that would already be choosing mobile rather than a fixed broadband connection. So that's something that we do face, and it is a factor in our pricing today.
On what dimensions do you primarily expect 5G will differentiate itself from NBN on price, convenience or quality?
It's early to say. I think one of the headline messages will be a very high burst speed, which I think can attract people's attention. Offsetting that is very difficult to maintain that speed or to carry the amount of traffic that we can carry over a fixed line network, but certainly from a wow factor or headline speed claim, I think 5G will have that to bring to the market.
A federal court decision recently paved the way for TPG and Vodafone to merge. Obviously, the merged entity is quite a different proposition to Telstra or Optus for NBN Co. Telstra has always been a high-cost, high-revenue player. Optus is more difficult to define, but TPG has a formidable and proven business culture which delivers quality broadband products at a lower cost. How will competition from a merged TPG-Vodafone entity challenge the pricing strategy NBN has largely successfully implemented to date because it hasn't faced price-based competition?
TPG as a competitor or as a retailer? Because they are one of our most substantial retailers and valued customers, and we work quite closely with TPG, including on pricing.
As a competitor?
Yeah, at this stage, we're looking at TPG as a partner, much like we would look at our Telstra or an Optus.
Do you anticipate...
I think, Senator, if I can just add to that,
yeah.
I think that we genuinely welcome 5G. We talk a lot about our purpose of NBN, which is to lift the digital capability of Australia, and I think 5G will as well. But we do think that 5G will serve a purpose that's different from NBN because of the traffic that's carried over fixed line networks. Today it's 90%, for example, of traffic is carried over fixed line networks. And although you do get spectral efficiencies and in other words 5G can carry more bandwidth, we also know that the demand for data is growing 25 to 30% per annum, 20 to 30 anyway per annum. And therefore we think over the long term it will sit beside NBN and will be a great service for the community. So that's why we talk about our large retailers as very much our partners. We want them to be a partner in this drive of ours to uplift the digital capability of the nation and hopefully provide better health and education and small business, tourism and so on, agriculture benefits to the community.
I appreciate that you want to see them as a partner, but I guess there is this competition element. So I'm wondering how NBN will respond to that. Will it result in lower prices or accepting some customers who are sensitive to price will switch?
Yeah, I'd look at that as our overall value proposition that we present to the retail service providers. So that's the product, the capability of the product, the availability, the reliability. Pricing is certainly a factor. How much capacity is included within that, which is one of the reasons that we moved into the bundling. how well our brand complements the retail brands as they're out there, typically talking about NBN broadband rather than broadband just generically, and having that great relationship with our partners and being easy to do business with. So we need to be ever improving in all of those areas in order to remain viable in the market.
But is NBN, I mean, assuming it's driven by commercial objectives, likely to cut its losses and stick with positioning itself as a high-cost, high-revenue player in the market?
I don't follow the question. Our intention is to serve the entire market. So if anything, we're looking to deepen the penetration rather than to pull back from that. So you can see that as an example in the expression of interest that we put out last week to look at how we can start addressing probably the least served segment of the market, which is the age pensioners. So, Mr. Rue talked about the 73 to 75% penetration. Our aspiration is to grow that penetration over time and play an even bigger role in lifting the digital capability of the nation rather than contracting, as you suggest.
And what happens if 5G produces an unlimited data offering? Does that change the construct of your entry-level pricing, or how does that impact you?
It's hard to imagine at this point, just based on my understanding of the technology, the physics, and the commercials, that there could be a sustained, unlimited 5G offering at that price point. So it's unlikely to have an impact on our entry-level pricing.
Okay. Now, Minister, earlier this evening, you claimed that the original Labor NBN plan would cost $30 billion more and take 6 to 8 years longer. Are you aware that every CEO of the NBN company, Mike Quigley, Mr. Rue and Bill Morrow, have given evidence before parliamentary committees that those numbers were not actually a costing of Labor's original plan?
I stand by what I said. I think I actually said that it was in the 2016 corporate plan that Senator Green was quoting from.
Sorry, who gave you those figures? Where do those figures come from?
They're long-standing figures that have been available. Yeah. I can reconfirm those figures for you.
Well, I'm just wondering if you wish to retract those claims because they have been rebutted on the public record already.
I absolutely stand by those figures. Where are we? It would have cost $30 billion more and taken at least 4 years longer to complete. 4 to 6.
Yes, they're the figures you use, but those figures have been rebutted by Mr. Quigley, Mr. Rue and Mr. Morrow on the record before parliamentary committees before, as not being a costing of Labor's original plan.
I've got the information that I've got available, which has been on the public record for a long time.
So you wish to stand by those claims?
Absolutely.
Over to you, Senator Green.
Thank you. Just some quick questions. I know Senator Van mentioned the ceasing of direct contracts with enterprise end users. What do you see the role of the industry engagement team going forward?
Yeah, sure. So the industry engagement team is part of my team, and their role is to educate end users on the range of options that are available from the NBN. Of course, one of the realities of business NBN is it's a new proposition. It's not well understood in the marketplace. So they go out, they talk to end users, and they advise them of their range of options. Broadband services, as I said, will always be purchased through a retailer. Those industry engagement team have traditionally talked about the different ways of building the network. It could be built through ordering through a retailer. It could be built through a direct contract with ourselves. As I said, that direct contract will no longer happen. But the role of the industry engagement team will continue to educate those end users on the range of options that are available to them.
Okay, so they'll still be involved in suggesting potential network solutions to end users. Will they be discussing expected pricing and non-price terms for network builds with end users?
So we don't set retail pricing. That's not a role of NBN. So no, that team will not be involved in setting expectations on retail pricing.
Is it wholesale pricing that they'll be discussing with end users?
Well, what the team is involved in doing is talking about the physical network and the range of options on how that network, if it was to be purchased, if it was to be an NBN network that was being purchased, how that could be achieved, the range of options that they could have, the different types of NBN broadband services that exist. We have multiple different broadband services for businesses, so they'll educate them on all those sort of things. But in terms of discussions on retail price points, that's something that NBN would be involved in.
Okay. So the industry engagement team will still exist and still be undertaking work, but there'll be a shift in the nature of the work that they're doing. Do you envisage that there will be a change to the mix of skills required for people in that team?
The team has been characterised as a sales team in the past, and I just want to repeat something that I've said previously. We've not had commission-based sales in NBN, and we have no intention of doing that. So the team doesn't go out and sell and in a traditional world get the the benefit of their work through success fees or anything like that. Their role is to educate, present options, talk about the benefits of NBN, the sort of things that building a broadband network on NBN fibre could achieve and unlock in their business.
But you didn't answer my question, Mr.
Sorry,
Tyler.
the question
Will
being...
the skills required as part of that team change because they'll be doing the work will change slightly?
I don't see how the skills would change. That team wasn't involved in negotiating contracts directly, so we had a commercial team that did the direct contract negotiations. So no, I don't see the skills in the industry engagement team would be different on an ongoing basis.
Okay. You mentioned commentary about the team being referred to as sales. I wasn't making that link, but I would like to know whether the team will have performance-based incentives based on end users taking up NBN products.
No, they don't.
Okay.
And they haven't, and so there's no change there.
All right. Just one last question from me. Really? 10 minutes to go. In the Torres Strait, there's limited access to NBN, and there's also limited access to 4G. There's been some investment being made from the Queensland government and I believe the federal government as well, Torres Strait Regional Authority. Do you know where the Torres Strait is, Mr. Yeah, yes, you're looking for very puzzled.
No, Senator, I've lived here long. I know I speak funny, but I've lived in Australia longer than I ever did in Ireland. Good. So I know very well where the Torres Strait is. I was just saying if Mr. Dyer, it's very late. Miss Dyer was going to acknowledge that she knew about this, so I was looking for someone to answer your question. I'm concerned about where you're going because I'd like to understand better. I'm sorry.
That's okay. There's been some recent announcements about upgrading the 4G network to improve the access to mobile coverage. Yeah. I'm just wondering what the progress is and if there's any plans around connecting the Torres Strait in terms of NBN coverage, even if it's from satellite services.
Do you have a...
Yeah, Sky Muster support services in the Torres Strait.
Sorry?
Sky Muster services are available in the Torres Strait Islands. They are available.
Is that delivered from the company we spoke about at the beginning of the hearing?
No, it's not. It's a standard Sky Muster service. Senator, can I ask you? Can you forward any details to our team about what you're talking about, and we can investigate? Because the Sky Muster service covers there, but you're saying the service, I think you said it wasn't good.
Well, there's limited connectivity across the Torres Strait Islands. It's a huge area. We're not just talking about Thursday Island in particular. I mean, there's a huge... Yeah,
but our satellite service covers there, Senator, so I'd like to understand... Yes, it's delivered by 2 satellites, that's correct. I'd like to understand more after this hearing so we can see if there's an issue we need to address.
Okay.
Chair, can I just add one last thing? I don't wish to go back to the...
Before you
oh, I'm sorry, Chair.
Senator Patrick has some questions before the klaxon sounds and we dive for the night. So,
thank you very much
Senator
for using submarine terminology there. Chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank Mr Ruth. Thank you for sending your team out to Woodner to have a chat with the locals. That was a most useful exercise, I think, for NBN, but also for
I promised
also
I
for
would,
Woodner.
in fact.
Senator, you probably don't recognise me with the tie, but I was there.
Okay, so...
No, we were
and-
pleased
yeah,
to do it, and
yeah.
Gavin reported back to me.
Yeah,
It was a good meeting, I understand, of the communities.
So I do want to say thank you for that. I do want to direct some questions to the department in relation to a grant that had been mentioned in the town, a stronger regional development connectivity package that was announced by the Minister.
Senator, would that be the... we do have a regional...
$60 million package.
Regional connectivity program, yes.
Okay. Has the eligibility criteria for that program been established?
Not yet, Senator.
Okay. When are you likely to establish it? Because this was announced some time ago.
Yes, we've consulted on the... We have consulted with industry on to get some feedback on how that program might be best designed, and we're now going through the process of working through that consultation from industry, which NBN responded to. I'll just see if I can give you an update on the next steps.
The guidelines. Senator, the draft guidelines are open for consultation until Friday the 13th of March, so they're actually out there at the moment.
Okay, so that can be found on a website somewhere?
That'll be able to be found on the website.
Yep.
So when we've got consultation, that consultation concludes, then we move to the program opening up.
Okay, that's very helpful. Have you looked at the $60 million and tried to get a feel for whether or not you're going to be oversubscribed? For example, in Woodner, to get fibre to the node is something of the order of $1.8 million. So obviously large amounts of money are involved in this. It's $2.7 million if it's fibre to the premise. Have you looked at demand?
I think, Senator, we have, insofar as, I mean, that's part of the reason why we consulted on, before we issued some draft guidelines. So yes, we are conscious that there may be more good ideas proposed than there is funding available, but in a sense, this is the sort of first go at this, and we won't be sure of whether there are more projects than we can fund.
All right, the guidelines draft criteria is published actually is good, and I can feed that back to the council. In those eligibility criteria or guidelines, is there any contribution that is required by the local community?
We would be expecting co-contributions. At least that is what's proposed at this juncture. Yes,
and that will be set out in the eligibility criteria.
Correct.
Okay,
yes,
thank you.
Right,
I'll look at that online. Final question, then, Chair. When do you expect the funding to commence? And an answer like shortly, in the near future, I'm used to those and they're not acceptable. In due course is another one.
While Mr Windier finds a more precise answer, I'll say in the ordinary course of events, at the end of a consultation on the guidelines, government considers a revised guideline, puts the program in the field, and then does an assessment process, and then entering into contracts. So.
And how long does that typically take?
It's 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, I think that's probably...
So we would say by the end of this financial year, this program ought to be up and running. Is that fair? How long is the consultation period for?
Closing on the 13th of March.
Okay.
So by the end of this financial year, we will certainly have the program. The program will certainly have been open for applications. We may well have applications in and be assessing them, but when we may not, to Mr Atkinson's point about sort of, let's imagine 3 to 6 months, depending on the complexity and the assessment and settling contract arrangements before we actually have got tied down contracts.
Okay, before the chair presses the klaxon, after the session, could you provide me with the web address, please?
Certainly.
Yes.
Thank you.
Senator Green, last question, and a very short answer, please.
Mr. Wright, I completely forgot to ask you this, but in the last estimates, I raised the issue of a petition about NBN in Sanford districts and about the rollout there. Can you just provide an update really briefly, and you can put some more information on notice if that's necessary, about what engagement has taken place with the community and what reassurance the community has been given from NBN?
Sure. So I think last time I gave you an update, I said that the area was under review. We've now completed that review and we're in the process of updating the community, and that has happened over the past week or so. And approximately 95% of the area will move to the fixed line technology. That will be a combination of, it'll be dependent on the passive network that's available, but it'll be a combination of FTTC, FTTP and FTTN. So again, that's been communicated, is going to be communicated with all the residents in those areas.
Okay, thanks. Quickly, Mr. You mentioned there's 2 satellites in the Torres Strait. When's the last time you were there? I've had some issues with my mobile, but when's the last time you visited the Torres Strait? I'm not asking you, sorry.
Oh, sorry, you're asking me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I didn't actually say I had visited the Torres Strait, Senator Green. I said that there were 2 SkyMaster satellites that provided 100% coverage to the region.
Okay, you haven't had to experience that on ground?
I didn't say I had. I just said that 2 satellites covered 100% of the area, Senator Green.
Yeah. Thank you.
No.
No.
It's not a mobile service.
Separate
2 different things.
technologies, just
Yes.
clarifying that.
There's a little conflation, Senator Davey, going on.
Yeah, I'm a SkyMaster.
Okay, Mr. Rood.
Chair, can I just make one?
Very quick final.
Can I just make one final comment too? The reason why I was so confident in answering Senator Green earlier about not missing targets, in the corporate plan in 2015, on page 58, we said the following: a contingency has been included to reflect the ongoing uncertainties of an infrastructure build of this scale and time frame, including uncertainties of revenue timing, and that's why we haven't missed our target.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the committee's examination of infrastructure, transport, regional development, communication portfolio. Senators reminded that written questions on notice should be provided to the Secretariat by close of business on Friday the 13th of March, and for NBN Co, any answers to questions on notice need to be back by the 17th of April. I thank the Minister and officers, I thank the Secretariat and staff, broadcasting and Hansard, and the committee will close for tonight.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair.